Good evening, everyone. This is the special meeting of the Trustees of Osgood Hill for April 12th, 2021. It is 7:05 p.m. and I am David Brown, the chairman of the Trustees of Osgood Hill. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter C 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order, imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Trustees of Osgood Hill will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 28, or they may view it online at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording transcript or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in public hearings, please email your question or comment prior to the meeting to dbrown@northandoverma.gov, and the question will be read during the proceedings and responded to accordingly. Let me just quickly check, see if anything has come in. There wasn't anything as of a little while ago. Nope. I do have an email from Tom saying he's going to miss the meeting because of illness, and that is it. So, so let me do a roll call of who is present. Place to write this down. Okay. Jerome Justin, Vice Chair.
Here.
Jean Irwin.
Here.
And Robin Ellington.
Here.
And Tom is not able to be here. Charles, are you out there listening? Not hear him. I've seen him. And then I'm the chair, Dave Brown, so we have a quorum of 4 out of our 7 members. We have only one item on the agenda tonight, which is a review and discussion of the DLS, Department of Local Services / Department of Revenue findings, which are available by that link in the meeting notice. And just briefly by introduction, this was a letter, accompanied by a letter from our town manager, Melissa Rodriguez, that was sent to the select board on March 12th, 2021. And I think for the record, I'll read the cover note. Just won't take a minute. It says, "Dear Select Board, as you will remember, that being Ms. Rodriguez, asked the Division of Local Services at the state to conduct a financial management overview of the enterprise fund accounting for the Stevens estate. And last night, she received the final report. As part of that review, the DLS staff met with the administration, the members of the Trustees of Osgood Hill. They reviewed financial statements and other documents and submitted a review of the accounting as well as recommendations. In summary, the report determines that the enterprise fund accounting is consistent with DLS guidelines and general accounting practices, and that the budget document clearly presents the finances, accomplishments, and challenges. The document lays out 2 potential avenues for the estate. 1, the town continues to operate and own the entity. It is noted that in order to continue in this direction, the town would need to determine an additional revenue stream or source for the estate, which would likely need to be the general fund, or 2, involvement of a third party. As stated in the report, the cell tower revenue is going to the general fund, which is appropriate. Currently, that revenue is being used to offset the indirect costs of the estate, which we moved into the general fund last year to help the estate. I want to thank the Division of Local Services for creating this report. I also want to thank all of the town staff and volunteers who assisted DLS. And finally, the report references a difficult relationship between the trustees of Osgood Hill and the administration. Both the trustees and my administration, that being Ms. Rodriguez, has worked hard over the past 18 months to improve our working relationship. And due to increased communication, collaboration, and mutual respect, I think we have done that. I look forward to continuing to build on that, and I thank the trustees of Osgood Hill for their commitment to the Stevens estate and to this wonderful community. I'm proud to work in a community where we work together to evaluate problems and concerns, and where our hard work and commitment to transparency is recognized by the state. And it was signed best, Melissa Rodriguez, Town Manager, North Andover. And then the entire report is, as I said, available for anybody listening to this who wants to see it, in the link that was provided in the notice of our meeting. So, like Robin, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could lead the discussion, because you were the one who kind of requested that we have this review.
Okay, maybe first we could begin by identifying any specific points that people want to address. What do we have, an hour for this meeting?
90 minutes.
90 minutes, okay. I can begin by identifying that I'd like to talk about the revenues on page 3.
Okay.
And the suggestion by the Department of Revenue to use the revenues derived from the cell tower lease as an optional source of revenue. Also on, I had it all organized. Excuse me, I have a dog here that I have to get rid of. Come on,
Okay.
out. Go. I don't know if you saw me bump down from being 5'8" down to 5'2". He reduced the height of my chair. Okay. Anyway. Where was that? Well, just going through page by page. Why don't I do it that way?
Okay.
On the revenues on page 3, it says to balance the budget at the under revenues, the last 4 lines on that page. The decision was made to balance the budget with a transfer from the General Stabilization Fund, allowed without town meeting approval due to COVID-19. Although not required, it is expected that the enterprise will reimburse the stabilization fund at a future town meeting, with previously appropriated unspent capital, retained earnings, and reduced current year spending. And I think it should be noted here that we do have money set aside for capital improvements that has not been spent. On the bathrooms, for example, the full amount that was allocated is has not fully been spent. So there are some savings realized there. There's also some unspent capital on projects that is left over, and then also for projects not started. So I don't have access to the full amount of what that would represent, but that's certainly some money that should be considered.
Okay.
If you turn to page 4, you can see from the years of between 2010 and current that we have never used town funds in order to sustain the Stevens estate. There was an article in today's Eagle Tribune which indicated that the Stevens Estate was a drain on the town where we have never taken money from the town. And as a matter of fact, we pay part of Andrew's salary, part of the town manager's salary, part of the finance department's salary. And that has never been stated for the public. And I'm wondering, Andrew, if you can help by clearing this up and correcting the misperception that is constantly being presented that is a detriment to the reputation of the Stevens Estate.
Sure. So you brought up an earlier point, and we can take this line by line. So you first raised the issue of the unspent capital funding, and then you were mentioning how you don't have the figure as far as the total for that unspent capital funding. So I just wanted to quickly address that, if I might.
Yeah.
So according to the records, and Joanna's here as well, and she certainly has these records as well. So Joanna, if this sounds wrong to you, then please feel free to correct me. But based on looking at the munis reports and working with town staff, identified $212,772.95 unspent among capital projects dating back from FY 2018 through FY 2021. So that is the number, that is the amount of unspent capital project funding. And in many respects, much of that funding would probably not be prudent to spend at this point, only in the, and I guess that's a subjective matter, so others might disagree, but only in the respect that because we've had less events recently because of COVID-19, we're not generating the amount of income that we typically would to account for those capital expenditures. So just something to keep in mind. On the issue of the article, obviously Joanna sent an email out earlier. I know you were all included on that. She included the town manager and myself. Something that both Melissa and I, the town manager, and I made clear to Joanna herself when we responded to this. And we didn't want to include the rest of the committee because we didn't feel like it was necessary. The issue there was the town did not make a statement with respect to the Stevens Estate being a quote unquote drain. That was made by someone else. We can't control what outside individuals are going to say about any number of projects that come before the town on a daily basis. There's any number of things that people remark on that are negative, positive, or otherwise. And as far as correcting the record, the town manager did reach out to the reporter, and this was before Joanna had even reached out to us. She reached out to the reporter who wrote the article and did correct the record on several of those points. So our town manager has done what she can as far as communicating with the newspaper and letting them know that they were incorrect on a few of the things that they had indicated.
If I could interrupt.
Sure.
Thank you. Correcting the reporter and correcting the newspaper without it appearing in print does not go very far in correcting the perception in the community. So I think there needs to be a statement from the town of North Andover, either to the paper in the form of a letter, or perhaps asking for a second story to be told in order to correct the misperception. Because it's not the first time I've heard that denigrating comment.
Okay, well, that's fine. I don't have the authority on my own to issue a statement from the town in regards to the Stevens Estate. All communication would go through the town manager's office. If the reporter had reached out to me before the article, I would not independently talk to that reporter. I would ask the town manager if it was okay if I speak to that reporter, and or defer to her if she wanted to be the one representing the town to speak to that reporter. So if you want to formally request that the town manager issue that statement, you're free to do that. It
has to come from the town of North Andover. I don't know who it is.
No, I understand. What I'm explaining to you is that I cannot, in responding to you right now, say, yes, the town's going to do that, because I don't have the authority to say that.
I'm not asking you to. I understand.
So
But there has never been a statement to correct that misperception for as long as I've been on the board. It's not the first time I've read something like that coming out of the newspaper, whether it be Patch, North Andover Citizen, and it seems like it's just about the same comment every time with a slightly different twist to it, and
well,
it does not go well when you consider the long range plan of managing the estate, the executive director trying to correct the perception on her own without having a town advocate to back her up on it. I mean, she's not a spokesperson through the newspaper either. So it's just left to sit there. And in my eyes, it makes it look like the town is allowing it to happen.
okay, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I think that, we've done, I think the town has gone above and beyond to try to support Joanna in her role. And, as I said, again, there's very little we can do to control what comes out of people's mouths about any number of subjects before they say it. And I think the other thing we try to do, generally speaking, is we try to operate in a very open and transparent way. So when you requested, that the finances of the Stevens estate be examined, that's why we pursued DLS being able to look at these finances. When you wanted to talk to the auditors, that's why we made the auditors available to the trustees. When you wanted to have the website refer to this board as the trustees as opposed to the Stevens Estate Advisory Board, we immediately did that upon request. We got a legal opinion about the oversight of the estate. I feel like there's several steps that this administration has taken, and I can't speak to the prior administration. I showed up in November of 2019. So the only thing that I personally can take responsibility for is anything that's happened, and that the town manager can take responsibility for, is anything that's happened since he came on, and I think it was September 2019, and when I came on, which was November of 2019. And I think since that time, we've been honest brokers in the way we've approached working with this group, working with Joanna, working with anybody who had a question about how the Stevens estate was operating. And then we went through the whole, as you know, the very open long-term advisory process. And I'm sure this group has misgivings about how that went, but the bottom line is we dealt with it in a very open and transparent way.
Speaking of the bottom line, is the Stevens estate losing money?
I believe the Stevens estate is operating at a deficit right now, again, because in 2000, because of COVID, yes. That's just
like
actual
any
information.
Business. Prior
Correct.
to COVID, where we're playing on a level playing field here, everybody's been affected by COVID. Prior to COVID, was the Stevens estate losing money?
I have to look at the last. I think Joanna, you would know better, but did we end up negative last fiscal year due to forces again beyond your control? I'm not saying.
Revenue report, it shows that we've been making money year to year since 2010.
Okay, then I guess that's the truth.
So why isn't there somebody at the town level defending this? Why are we?
What is there to defend? What is there to defend? It's not. The question before the people of North Andover hasn't been whether or not that the town, that the Stevens estate has been making money. That's not the question. The question is, does the town want to continue operation of the Stevens estate? Can it take on the numerous obligations that are before it to maintain the estate and improve the estate, capital projects, make it all that it can be, continue to operate it in the way that we've been operating it, and with the staff that we have, including myself, Joanna, and all the part-time staff, or does the town want to go to another operating model? And so that is why, in my understanding of the situation, the town select board opted to bring forward the long-term advisory committee, examined this issue at length, and they came up with the recommendation that they came up with. So I don't think it's a matter of binary. Do we make money? Do we not make money? If we make money, everything needs to be status quo. If we don't make money, then we can do something else. I think it's taking everything into consideration holistically and understanding, does the town want to continue along that path? And I guess between the long-term advisory committee and the current, well, we'll see what the select board does, but you know what the long-term advisory committee has recommended.
So if I could interrupt here, a couple of things. One, Charles is actually on the meet. Charles, I don't know if are you here?
Yeah, I'm right on the phone.
Perfect. So can Jerry please show that Charles is in attendance?
Thank you.
Yep. I just want to make sure that that's noted in the record, because I know I recognized your phone number, but I don't think anybody else did. So thanks for calling in. I'm glad that was successful. Okay. What I was going to say next is, I mean, I think for the purposes of tonight, I'd like to go, Robin, if you wish to go through point by point on this report and discuss it, that's fine. I think we should move to further points, unless someone wants to make a motion to request such a letter like you were describing or something like that. I think we should move to the next item.
Or a motion for the trustees to write a letter to the newspaper. Are we ready to do something like that?
Well, I certainly entertain that motion if you want to make it.
So what does everybody else think? Jean, Jerry?
So I think my view on this is supportive of what Andrew described, and it's unfortunate and it impacts all of us when these kinds of statements make their way into the paper, but it kind of is what it is. So I think an alternative is, Robin, if you feel strongly, as a private resident of North Andover, that it's unfairly representative of the Stevens estate, you could do one of a couple of things. One is shoot a note to Melissa and kind of share your point of view, with the understanding that Andrew just shared that I guess she reached out to the Eagle Tribune. The other option is to write a letter to the editor, to the paper. But I would just say, as a private resident of North Andover, not kind of on behalf of the board, unless we make a motion to do something like that on behalf of the board. But you as a private resident can have a couple of different avenues, open to you. But I think I'm expressing my view that I share your perspective, Robin, to some degree. But it's the battle that we've been fighting for a while. And as Andrew said, it wasn't a town official. It was somebody, an old, prior select person who happened to somehow or another get the ear of the reporter and made the statement. So, which is unfortunate, but we can't control all speech, basically.
I'm sorry, I just want to say one other thing, not actually about this in specific. I'm just remembering something Robin said at the beginning. She was talking about how, so I just want to be very clear that Stevens Estate Enterprise Fund does not pay my salary, any portion of my salary. In the past, through the indirect costs, and there's a formula, and we've talked about this, I think, ad nauseum, so I'm not going to relitigate this, but the point is there is a formula that is passed on to the town accountant from the auditors to apply what that number is, the indirect costs. And part of those indirect costs do cover things like portions of different employees, like how much it costs for our insurance, for instance. So in that respect, yes, maybe like a sliver of compensation in the totality of it went to me. But the point is that no, it does not pay my salary. And we have, and on that subject specifically,
No, I
of
never
indirect
intended
costs,
to say that we paid
okay,
your entire salary.
No. And I'm not saying,
that.
I'm not saying you did. I'm not saying that, but
Okay.
you mentioned that it pays my salary, the town manager's part of our salaries. And I'm just saying that is actually not factually accurate. And I just want to say, because we're recording this meeting, I'm not arguing with you, Robin. I'm just trying to set the record straight so that if someone's listening to this meeting and they come again, because we're talking about misconceptions in the community, right? So, this is where misconceptions start, is conversations like this in public
The
forums.
reason
And
I
so,
brought that up is because we have been accused, the Stevens estate has been accused of being a drain on the town of North Andover, when in reality, we have given back to the town of North Andover in the form of paying portions of salaries or insurance, whatever it is, and still maintaining a profit. That's
okay,
why I
well,
said that.
just as long as people understand that it's through that indirect cost mechanism, which isn't really tangential to salary per se. And then we have not, for the past 2 fiscal years, well, the last fiscal year and this fiscal year coming up, we're not charging that back to the estate. So the estate's not contributing indirect costs in the past 2 fiscal years. But just wanted to set the record straight on that. That's all.
The indirect costs are usually what's associated with the estate, whether it be as account payable, something like that. So I actually have to agree with Jerry, as much as I just read that article and it is disparaging to Joanna, which I think is unfair. Not specifically Joanna mentioned, but I think it's unfair as somebody who has put her heart and soul into the project. But I have to agree with Jerry that I do think the town has been extraordinarily fair and clear with this new administration. Again, I can't speak to the old administration either. I wasn't around. I wasn't involved. And on paper, it looked like it wasn't as transparent. Let's put it that way. But I think as for Melissa and Andrew and what they've done for us thus far, I think, as somebody who works in municipalities, I think they've done their due diligence with us. And it's unfortunate because it's not the result that we want. And what's also unfortunate is the misconception about Joanna's performance, and she's been nothing but spectacular. And it's actually very sad that she's not going to get the opportunity to turn the place around and shine, which she very well could because of her talent and her way. We can't account for COVID. Nobody can. But every hospitality industry, every business in the world in hospitality has taken a tremendous hit. And for Joanna to even keep the trickle of business and the flow of inquiries and everything that she has is a true tribute to her professionalism and such. So unfortunately, that wasn't reflected in the article. But I do have to support what Jerry says, that I don't. If we want to write something as individuals, that's one thing, but that's just my thought and feeling.
Sorry, I apologize to keep interjecting myself. Can I make one more comment, Dave?
Sure.
So, and just on that note specifically, Gene, in referencing Joanna, listen, I'll say it till the cows come home. I couldn't agree more with respect to Joanna. And I know the town manager agrees with this. We think she's done an excellent job steering this ship, okay, especially during these extremely turbulent times where we've had to be creative about how to run events, how to keep expenses in line with less events happening during COVID and even prior to that. So again, I, as disparaging as that article was, and as the much misinformation that may have been in that article, I would put it out on record any day of the week that none of that, even if it were true, is attributable to Joanna. That's not true. We appreciate the job that Joanna's done, and we've said that in public forums before, not only here, but in front of the board of select board and in other forums. So, and I think that was also something that came out in the long-term advisory report. I think the long-term advisory report has it in writing that they recognized Joanna's work in that regard as well. So I'll say it again here, and I'll always say that.
I'm sorry, folks, I haven't had a chance to read it, so before I comment, I mean, I don't know, Charles, if you want to make a comment, I'm trying to read it quickly.
I'm not familiar with the issues.
Okay.
Except one thing on the presenting anything to the newspapers, there could be a conflict of interest from a private citizen of North Andover who is also on the advisory board.
When you say advisory board, Charles, what do you mean?
This committee, if anyone from there approaches the newspapers per se with
Oh, so
any
you mean the
information,
Board of Trustees? We
that is
as the
correct.
Board of Trustees, yes.
That is correct. Or anybody
I
representing
thought
the
you meant
town.
the other committee.
Anybody representing the town.
So
But,
if there is no decision then of us as a board, then I'll go ahead and write a letter myself. All right, moving ahead. Speaking of indirect costs, on page 6, I think it goes in part to what you just said, Andrew. There was a jump in indirect costs charged to the Stevens estate between 2017 and 2020. So I think that that's why Melissa made the decision not to charge us indirect costs to make up for that, or what? How can that jump be explained?
Well, again, I kind of alluded to this in my previous response about that. So the auditor indicates to the town accountant the formula-driven amount to charge for indirect costs for enterprise funds. So I know that's a little bit wishy-washy and nuanced, but that's the information that we have. They're told, what, they're given the information about the operations of the Stevens estate, and they assign through a formula an amount to be charged back in indirect costs. I would note that back in 2007, so quite a while back, it was over 80,000. I don't know the exact amount there. I'm just looking at the bar on the chart on the graph. So it was certainly, that was, I think 2018 and 2019 look lower than that. Maybe it got up to that amount in 2020. So it's not that amount charged in indirect costs is certainly not unprecedented. Maybe doing, having it 3 years in a row might have been much. But and then as far as why the town manager opted not to continue to charge indirect costs, it was more, again, and this goes back to the general conversation about support for the estate. I think it was the town's effort to show goodwill toward the estate, given, some of the issues that have come up in the past, and say, look, the town wants to support the estate, so we're willing to, in order to reduce the financial burden here, not charge this. So that's something the town did.
I can add a little color there, Andrew.
Sure.
That decision, Melissa came early on when she was hired, fairly early on, within a couple of months, came to our board meeting. I think, Jerry, you were already on the board at that point with me. I'm not sure if you were or not, but that was one of the things we were raising, was just why are we paying? This was before the true impact of COVID really had begun, and one of the discussion points was basically, why are we paying X dollars for these central services, and yet we don't have much control over them? Why can't we, the Stevens estate, go out and hire our own financial person, or our own another person to handle our stuff that we could then make better use of? It's one of our thoughts, and I think that Melissa reacted positively to that by making this offer. So, am I remembering that right, Jerry? I think you were there.
Yeah, so is Jerry. So I think there was an acknowledgement that there wasn't a full level of transparency around what the formula is, and I assume for all the enterprise funds, including water and sewer as well. And I think that's reflected in the DLS report as an improvement area, that there's this kind of disconnect of the way that the indirect costs are allocated to the enterprise funds, and there needs to be more visibility around that formula, and engaging, certainly Joanna as the estate director and the board, to have more visibility and input into what those impacts are. So I think we've had the issue in the past. I think Melissa kind of acknowledged, ooh, it seems like there's a disconnect here. Let's take a couple years to sort through it. DLS picked up on it, and as part of an action item, an improvement area going forward is to improve that visibility around what the appropriate formula is for indirect cost allocations to the estate. That's my view.
Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't that has to be done every year as far as they recalculate everything, correct? And like
Yeah,
reformulate, like come up with, okay, this is what we're gonna do from this. It almost like a time assessment, a random moment time assessment study that has to get done, and how much time what one person is putting towards this enterprise fund and that enterprise fund. It did go up significantly, instantly, but I know Melissa talked about that she was going to redo it for the next fiscal year.
that she was going to reinstitute it, is what you're saying?
Not reinstitute, recalculate it, reconfigure it. You know what I mean? Like it's supposed to be evaluated every year and reconfigure it as far as like you don't use the same standard percentage from year to year. Is
Well,
what I'm saying.
yeah, but I know that it's not being assessed in this coming fiscal year. In other words, so as you all know at this point, there's a partial budget being put forward to town meeting for the Stevens Estate Enterprise for the Enterprise Fund. So it's not being assessed this coming fiscal year, and I don't think there's any plans, even if another budget were to be presented to go further out for whatever reason. I don't know of any plans to reinstitute it, at least anytime soon. So.
Yeah, so I think this is Jerry again. So I would just say that within the DLS report, they provided an example of a policy, basically, around indirect cost allocation. So even if Stevens Estate, the operational model changes, think of enterprise funds also include water and sewer. So it looks like there's a need, independent of the Stevens Estate, to have some kind of a policy in place to describe how indirect costs are allocated. That's my take on the report, and the sample's right in there. So.
All right. Do we need to discuss that any more? All right. What else would go on, Robin?
The only other point that I wanted to emphasize here is on the bottom of page 10. It was a suggestion by the Department of Revenue to address the use of facilities by its other departments, seeing that it's being used as a storage facility, and how that could be, we could actually collect users' fees or rental fees for the use of that space, which I thought was an excellent idea. And then there was an overriding theme through the whole report on how the executive director needs to be part of town discussions when setting the percentage for the indirect costs, for creating a policy, for setting the budgets, discussing rental fees for the use of the outbuildings. I just hope that concept is carried forward and that it's actually included in the budgeting process.
Hey, can you turn
Can I-
that radio down?
Can I just quickly
Yeah, that's
mention
a
something, Dave?
knob. Just turn it down. Thank you.
Dave, can I make one comment?
Yes, go ahead.
The only comment was, yeah, so with respect to the indirect cost, if there were a policy created for that, as Jerry mentioned, and as you just mentioned, Robin, certainly, we'd want to include Joanna as the executive director in that process. With respect to the budget specifically, Joanna is very much involved in that. We ask her to draft the budget every year. We ask her to be the starting point on the budget. So we take the information that she gives us. And then in fact, when we created this revised sort of, I guess you'd call it an abridged budget or a
Interim would be a better word,
interim
right?
budget. Sure. We sought her counsel on sort of the best and worst case scenarios for costs and revenue for the first part of the year. So we very much value Joanna's opinion in the budgeting process, and that we would never anticipate that to change. Oh, and as far as and the same goes for the input on the fees for the use of the other buildings, the other buildings on the property. The only thing that's a little tricky about that is they're not really usable buildings. So, I mean, like if you go in them, there's not, it's not like we can use it right now for functions. And Joanna might be able to speak a little more eloquently on that subject than I would. But like, the carriage house, it's not in a state where it can be used for many other purposes, but what it's being used for right now is storage, or if anything were to be removed, to hopefully renovate it at some point. But it's in need of a lot of repair, that and the other buildings.
Okay. By the way, I've now read that article. It's pretty crappy, but there's so many things wrong with it that it's ridiculous. Like it says, yeah, I love this. For more than a decade, North Andover has discussed turning the estate over to an event management company. Well, I don't know where they get the definition of a decade from, but I think all the discussion has been in the last 2 years. To me, that's not more than a decade. That's quite a bit less than a decade. I mean, it's filled with stuff like that, right? So, how do I put it? This ain't the New York Times. I mean, yeah, I think the former select board quote is pretty crappy, but
they also misconstrue the RFP process. So they looked at the Trustees of Reservations proposal as a valid proposal.
Right.
So they're basically saying the
Right.
town has two proposals when we're actually, in fact, only considering one at this point for the reasons that everyone on this meeting knows at this point. So I think it's honestly, I think it's less a statement about the Stevens estate, more of a statement on the modern perils of journalism. The modern
But
state
no
of
one
journalism.
knows that. I mean, there's a readership out there that doesn't have the slightest idea that that's wrong.
Right. I do share a little bit of Robin's concern there, I have to admit. So I haven't spoken yet. Like we went around the
So
table.
is that you're saying, Dave, that you'll go in on the letter with me?
Well, I mean, I'm more inclined now to if everyone doesn't mind, I'd like to continue the discussion on that for a minute because, I worry a little bit. I'm now giving my personal opinion because everyone has gone around and done that, right? I do worry a little bit that if it's not answered, it's almost a tacit agreement.
Yes.
That does concern me a little bit. And in particular, the point Andrew just made also jumps out at me, right? That there's paragraph or a couple of paragraphs about they even went and interviewed this fellow who's the managing director of conservation. I mean, we cannot consider the town of North Andover cannot legally consider their bid, right? We can't. It's illegal. Our town council advised us of that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's nowhere in here, right? So I am a little worried that about the we don't respond, therefore it's almost like we agree. I don't know. On the other hand, will they get our rebuttal right, or will they mess that up?
Well, if it's a letter, they can't change it.
Yeah, well, you hope. I don't know. Does that? I'm curious, Gene and Jerry. Does that impact your feeling before I move to any kind of motion?
And Charles.
And Charles, sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
It doesn't change my perspective on the response, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, not happy about it. but I think the response could do more harm than good,
Yeah.
depending on how it's crafted. So,
All right. Gene, any other feelings on that?
I still feel the same. I think it's unfortunate, but what's our goal and objective to, I understand to try to go to bat for Joanna, but I just don't think it will. I just don't think it will accomplish anything, and God knows that we might be misrepresented. I've had enough articles written incorrectly about myself, or about jobs that I've done, to know that, like, just I don't know. I just leave it alone.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, anyway, Robin, you have my feedback now on that. Oh, Charles, I'm sorry. Did you want to make any more comments?
Where is this article findable, as I have not seen it?
It's in today's Eagle Tribune.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a negative. On
Yeah.
the,
It's basically it's just got a lot of mistakes in it, and it implies some. It implies it implies that you've done a bad job managing it. That's what everybody's upset about.
oh, seems like it should be responded to.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Well, so let me maybe make a motion, Robin, if you like.
Did you say you would or I could?
No, I think it'd be inappropriate for me to.
Can I just, I'm sorry. Can I say
Go
one more
ahead.
thing here?
Yeah.
I was just sort of reading through the article again. Honestly, I mean, I'm not trying to, put lipstick on a pig here, but, really the article itself does not attribute the negative. I mean, it doesn't say that the town, it doesn't say those words. It doesn't say that is a drain on the town. It provided a quote from an individual. And then it goes off and talks about the RFP and everything else. It's saying it's portraying what it says the town is doing right now. And then it throws in a quote rather carelessly, I totally admit, from this one individual who made those unfortunate comments. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, if anything, I feel like people need to write a letter to that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the way it feels like to me. And just on the issue of like Joanna, I honestly don't think this impugns Joanna. It doesn't bring Joanna's name into it, and it doesn't use the words executive director of the estate. I mean, it's
Actually,
I don't
you're
know.
right.
I think someone has to really draw lines and connections and make inferences. And I'm not blaming Joanna for being upset about the article. I'm not blaming anybody for being upset about the article. No one likes inaccurate portrayals to be put out there. I just think it needs to be taken at face value, is all I'm saying.
Isn't Tracy on one of the boards in town, or like the finance committee?
She's on the CPC, I believe. I don't know if she's on multiple boards, but I think she's on the CPC.
She was at least at one time, yes.
But I don't think she was. But when she made her comment, I don't think she made it as a member of a board.
No.
I think she made it as a private citizen.
No, you know what? And I just reread it again. Andrew's correct. The bad part of this article is the paragraph attributable to her. It doesn't say anything here about the town mismanaging it. It doesn't say anything about. Doesn't make any statement whatsoever about any of that. It just has this quote from a former North Andover Select Board member. That's a nasty quote, right? But that's it. So if you took that paragraph out, it would be harmless, right? And
it'd basically be a bunch of information about how the town is running its RFP process. A bunch of that information, albeit is inaccurate in and of itself, but that's all it would really be.
All right. You know what? I won't be voting in favor of it, so there's no point. It's gonna.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. But I'm glad we discussed it, and I think that was good to air that. All right. So, Robin, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about within?
Those were my points.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything. This was our single agenda item for tonight. I I don't have anything to add personally, so I'd like to go around and see if anyone else wants to add anything to discuss. And then if not, I think we'll probably be done. Jerry, do you want to bring anything up about this DLS report?
So I think the DLS report answers or addresses, better term, addresses some of the observations from the question 1 through 23. So at the next meeting, I think we should do a review of those open questions that we have not received responses for from the town and see what aspects of those questions DLS essentially answered on the town's behalf. So that's a future agenda item for the next meeting.
All right.
Dave, just so you notice, Joanna raised her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Go ahead, Joanna.
Hi, Dave. I've got like 3 questions or clarification points I would like to ask, just mainly on the terminology in the report, if I may. And I don't know who can answer it, but I'll go through the 3 pages. So basically, the first one was on page 3, and it's the middle paragraph, the last sentence. So it's talking about economic conditions and revenues, etc. The last sentence says, if DLS feels that estimated revenue is in excess of what is reasonable, the tax rate will not be approved. So is there a typo there, or is that there, if that's a fact? So there is a point at which the DLS sees excess revenue as becoming a problem if it's not reasonable.
Oh man,
Well,
is that did they mean costs?
I don't see that. I apologize. You said page 3, Joanna?
Yeah.
It's the middle paragraph. It's
Oh,
the
middle
last
paragraph.
at the end. Yeah.
I wonder if that is a typo.
Yeah. So it may very well be.
Right. What it says is if DLS feels the estimated revenue is in excess of what is reasonable, I think they must mean cost. If estimated cost is in excess.
Okay.
I didn't read it as costs.
So how would it make sense this way, Jerry?
Estimated revenue is based on assumptions, right?
Yeah, and
For a
they're
future
talking.
looking budget. So
they're talking about in the previous sentence. They say in all cases, the estimated revenue derived from the enterprise activity, including user charges, sales, or fees, and any subsidy, must be supported by documentation proving the revenue is enough to cover the estimated expenses. If DLS feels that the estimated revenue is in excess of what is reasonable, the tax rate will not be approved. So the way I read that, based on the prior sentence, is basically saying if you can't substantiate what you're saying you're going to bring in revenue, we're not going to approve the tax rate, because you need to prove to us that this is a reasonable assumption. You can't just say, hey, we're going to bring in $1 million next year. Trust us. We did $200,000 last year and $300,000 the year before. We're going to do $1 million this year. We promise. You have to actually substantiate it with something reasonable in writing or something. You have to provide a reasonable assumption. And
it's weird English. The better way to put it would have been,
yeah,
it feels that your estimate is outrageous. We won't approve it.
Right.
Yeah, like you're making too much money. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, and just I think they want to. I think they're saying that to prevent towns from being like, oh shoot, we're not going to be able to show that we're going to cover our costs, so we better just throw in a number in there that we expect this amount of revenue, because they want it to be substantiated. That's all.
Yep, I get it. Does that make sense, Joanna? Do you see it?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. My second question is, so on page number 5, there's a retained earnings chart at the top. And in 2017, we had 125,000 appropriated from retained earnings to capital,
right,
which isn't on that chart.
Okay,
So
can you repeat that one more time, Joanna?
So retained earnings, if you look at 2018 through 20, in the appropriated line, 110, 120, and 50,000. Well, there was 125 appropriated in FY 2017. That was the first year of the 5-year capital improvement plan.
So you're saying it's missing an appropriation from 2017?
Yeah, and I'm not saying it makes any difference. I'm just saying it's not there when it should be there.
Okay, we can take a look at that.
Okay. I have one more thing. Oh yeah, so and this goes back to basically at page number 2. So on the last paragraph in number 2, it talks about the enterprise fund must be balanced with revenues and other available funds. And it goes back to the estimated revenues generated by the estate are sufficient to cover the cost of the services, which is what we talked about a couple of minutes ago. So in this situation, there are other enterprises run by municipalities in the state of Massachusetts that have future forward bookings, for events or activities. What is the state giving these other enterprises as a way to address this COVID year? Because I understand that the quarter budget for FY22, but it really leaves us in a precarious position if things don't go as planned. So I'm wondering whether other enterprises have the same problem and how they're getting around it. Maybe this is the wrong forum. I don't know. Just something.
I mean, I think it's a valid thing to want to know. I think, how are other, like, I'm sure there's other towns that might own
golf clubs.
Yeah, golf clubs certainly, or things like that, where you have to have gatherings and they've been impinged by this limit, the capacity limits from COVID-19. I mean, the problem is too, though, is that town budgets have also been constrained in general. I mean, like, for instance, think about like meals taxes and things like that. So I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, something I said to someone a while back is that, and I'm not trying to say it to be negative about, facilities like this that are town owned. It's like, there are less of these in the future than there are more of these. I'm only saying that to say that it's a challenging thing to operate across the board. And you guys mentioned earlier, the challenges of COVID-19. That's challenging for private businesses, just as it would be challenging for a municipally run event venue. That we share the same challenges as the private industry in that regard. So I'm only saying that just to say that, I would be willing to bet that if there were 50 town-owned golf courses in the state of Massachusetts today, 10 years from now, there's going to be less than that. There's not going to be more than that. I highly doubt towns and cities are rushing to take control of, entities like this where they have to create an enterprise fund, and on a year-to-year basis, they need to make sure that they're meeting their expense obligations and exceeding that, in fact, so that they can continue to improve those facilities and keep up with maintenance and all the rest. It's very difficult to do if you're a private business, and it's very hard to do if you're a public entity.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right. Forget where we were. Oh, Jerry, you had gone. Jean, did you give us I don't think I'd gone to you yet.
No, I've said my piece.
Okay. So, Robin, do you have anything more you want to talk about tonight?
I covered my points.
And then, Charles, anything from you?
Yeah, so what we just heard is so true in the case of towns of Middleton and Linfield. They've also closed their golf courses. They'll be developed into housing eventually.
Yeah. All right. Any other anything on the DOR report that you want to discuss? Nothing, I guess. All right. If that's the case, then I think we've satisfied our agenda for tonight. We'll be having a regular meeting at the end of April. I have not found a date yet, but I will work on that. It'll either be the end of April or early May, where we'll approve our minutes from last meeting and from this meeting that we just had. I usually like to summarize any action items, but I don't believe that there are any.
Oh, one last thing.
Sure.
From the meeting that I took minutes at, we were talking about the fact that Munis could not reflect cash deposits, and that I forget who was, Andrew, did we ask you to set up a meeting, I think, with Lynn Savage, or
Go ahead,
to
Joanna.
find out
Do you want to?
how that could be tweaked?
So we've actually taken care of this. So basically now in Munis, there is a future year deposits where deposits that aren't going into the current fiscal year for a future year event are now going in separated into that separate account. And also the event, the lines of the deposit also have the event titles now so that I can identify them by the event title. So those Munis related issues have been addressed and resolved.
And
So my
I think
question
they're
is, if
reflected. I was just going to quickly say, I think they're reflected in the last retained earnings snapshot that you received. I think they're one of the sub documents within that
Right.
financial report. Anyway,
And
go ahead, sorry.
I look at those as that's like the word I like to use for that is backlog. They're the equivalent of a commercial enterprise's backlog, right? You can't as an accountant, you can't say that it's revenue, but it's it's
because
there.
you can't ship it.
Right.
It's on backlog.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's our equivalent of backlog. Anyway, go ahead, Robin. Sorry.
So say you take a cash deposit for a wedding for fiscal year 2022, and it's a non-refundable deposit, and they cancel in 2021. It's just I'm just curious, where does that money go?
Good question.
Does anybody know? Okay, I was just curious.
It's a really good question.
So you're asking where the money goes. I'm sorry, say this. Can you just repeat the question? Sorry.
So here we are in fiscal year 2021. We accept a cash deposit for a fiscal year 22 wedding. They cancel. It's a refundable deposit, which we have in FY21. We have the cash in FY21. Where does that money go?
Yeah, so it stays with the enterprise fund. It should, right? Because it's not refunded. But the problem is that if you're basing your revenue on your booked events, so if Joanna has 10 booked events, just making numbers up here, 10 booked events for FY22, and so you've got the deposit money from those 10 booked events, and then you say, we're going to generate $200,000 on those 10 booked events. Now you're not going to make $200,000 because you just lost an event. So one of your assumptions is just blown up, that you're reporting to DLS. So we talked about the assumptions you're providing to DLS for your revenue. You're saying, well, we've got 10 booked events, so we expect to make $200,000 because we made an average of, $20,000 per event here. So we're going to do that again this year. Well, now it's not true anymore, or you're going to have to work harder to make that reality. So it's not a matter of yeah. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just suggesting that it's not a matter of where the money goes. It's more a matter of how you make up the revenue that you were anticipating to make that you're no longer guaranteed.
No, but my question had to do with the cash.
Right. I think I know the answer. I think what would happen, or what would make sense for it to happen, would be when you were in fiscal year 22, that has to get converted from a deposit to revenue.
Gotcha.
That's right. That is true. Yes, because that is the year where you can start to use that money for your budget. You can use it. You can allocate it to expenses.
Right. Because then you can book it, to use the commercial terms. So,
I will say it is a little unreal because you do actually invest time in the current fiscal year if an event is taking place in the next year. So whether you have a detail meeting for an event in July, the sales time that you've invested in it, the conversations, things like that. So some of the time allocated is actually on the booking end as opposed to the event end, but it's usually about 5%, 10%, depending on how needy the client is in those
Interesting.
early days.
All right. All right. So I think we have exhausted our agenda. So I will, unless anyone has anything else they want to raise up, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Would someone like to make one?
Yep, Mr. Chair, as Jerry, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you,
I'll
Jerry.
second.
Thank you, Robin. Let's see, Jerry, what's your vote on that motion?
Aye.
And Jean,
Aye.
Robin,
Aye.
Charles.
Okay, time. Yep.
All right, and chair votes yes in favor of adjournment. Thank you, everybody. Look for emails from me trying to schedule the next meeting. I'll check the camp schedule and let everybody know.